I must admit that's the kind of, I mean, when we last met, I was not really deeply into UFOs at all, or aliens or anything, but since that time I've been dragged kicking and screaming into that world, and so I've taken a deeper look. And I must admit, reading through a lot of the reports, I'm brought to tears.
Yes.
Most of the time.
Yes.
But there is probably within me and within you and within most people who are interested in this, that little glimmer of something which keeps you looking.
Absolutely.
You've come away from the MOD, even though most of those reports are boring, etc., still not knowing.
Yes.
In fact, you know, coming from a position more towards the believer than you were before you went in.
Yes, and the other thing, particularly when I was doing that job, is you never knew what the next phone call was going to be. And you never knew when you opened up a letter whether it would have in it, you know, one of the most spectacular photos of a UFO that you'd ever seen, which you could then take to the MOD technical specialists and they could work their wizardry. You never knew. You knew statistically that the next phone call was probably going to be misidentification of the planet Venus, but
did you always tell the person what conclusion you'd come to? So if you had a report, you would always give them one back?
I would always try to back brief, yes, and that was interesting because sometimes people would accept it and say, oh, thank you very much. Sometimes people would sound rather disappointed. They thought they'd had some wonderful experience, and you say, actually, I found out that there was a big airship and it was filming the European Cup final game that they were showing it wherever, and people go, I thought I'd seen something. And the third reaction was sometimes you would get downright hostility and disbelief. No, it wasn't. I know what I saw. I'm not an idiot. Oh, you would say that. You're part of the cover-up.
Absolutely.
You're just trying, and I would become the bad guy.
Yeah.
So, yes, I would try to back brief people because I thought it was my duty and I thought it would be helpful. But you know, the reaction that I then got from the original witnesses varied.
In all honesty, then I have to ask this because there's conspiracy people out there. You never really did ever give a false back brief. Just to stop people from maybe, even if it was black technology.
Well, I have never given a false back brief. The whole, I mean, black technology, black projects is obviously an area that I can't discuss in any great detail. Suffice to say, I think the whole UFO community sometimes overplay this black project theory massively. Yes, of course, there will always be prototype aircraft and UAVs being test flown, but we know where, and we know where we don't do these things, and I think you can disentangle black projects from UFOs to a huge, if not total, extent. I can't really answer the hypothetical. If somebody had seen some prototype and I knew that they had, I probably wouldn't have told them anything. That way I wouldn't have told a lie.
Yes.
It's funny. Let's come on to that because it's a question that comes up time and time again. And I know a lot of conspiracy theorists disbelieve this, but in my experience, the one thing that you were taught from day one is that you don't lie. You don't lie to ministers, you don't lie to Parliament, you don't lie to the press. And if, for example, if you put a brief up and it contains an untruth, and a minister repeats that untruth in Parliament, by convention that minister must resign, even if it's not a deliberate mistruth. Well, let me slightly qualify that. On a small point, provided the minister comes back and says, I apologise for inadvertently having misled the House, that is recoverable. But certainly if there's anything major, and certainly if there's any deliberate attempt to tell a falsehood, that's an absolute resignation offence. For a civil servant, it would be a very serious disciplinary offence, penalty for which could include instant dismissal.
So better therefore not to say it.
Yeah, it's quite acceptable to say that's not something I can comment on. It's quite acceptable, again, perhaps we'll come on to this later, but it's acceptable, and people do it all the time, of course, to talk up a good news story and play down a bad news story. And I think you can see that happen not just in government, but in business. Look, let's take a classic example. Supposing a major company posts its profit figures, and for a particular quarter, and they're not as good as expected. It doesn't say, yeah, these figures are really terrible, and this is a complete disaster, because of course it's going to push the share price down even further. What they say is, well, actually, although it's not quite as high as we hope, we've got to bear in mind the wider economic situation, and set against a global downturn, we think these figures are actually pretty good given the situation, and you're talking it up.
Yes.
It happens all the time, and you see football managers do it. Well, it's I still think that he's going to be fit for the next FA Cup match, and part of it is what many managers call kidology, of course.
So, are you telling us that you are maybe taught in the Ministry of Defence, in positions that you were in, how to spin?
I wasn't. Okay. I have been media trained by the MOD, and that certainly covers a sort of general media awareness, and gives you an idea of those sorts of issues. I was not a press officer. It's the press officers who have the direct interface with the media. I've helped draw up news briefs. Now the point is, with a news brief, it comes back to this point. It must be truthful. Let's take a bad news story. Let's take, say, the crash of a military aircraft, and say the death of a pilot. Well, the first thing you must do is have the absolute facts. This is when it happened. This is what the aircraft was. This is, the details of the casualty. And you can't lie about this. You can't pretend it didn't happen. You can't cover it up. You have to face the facts and make an announcement. But what you do in a situation like that is you will your first thing is always your people, and say this is a terrible tragedy, and it's a very difficult time. Our thoughts and sympathies go to the family and friends of the pilot who tragically lost his life in this incident. Then you will look at the facts of the case. Now, with an aircraft accident, because there's automatically going to be a board of inquiry, your position is, if the media are saying, well, come on, this aircraft, this model of aircraft is now 30 years old, this was bound to happen, wasn't it? You can. I'm sort of reluctant to use the phrase hide behind, but because there's going to be a board of inquiry, because it's very important, you don't prejudice it, you can bat away all questions like that. You can say, well, it would be improper to say, it would be improper to speculate at this stage in advance of the board of inquiry, but I can assure you that in order to find answers for the family and to ensure that something like this never happens again, we will get to the bottom of this incident, and we will ensure that lessons are learned, if there are indeed lessons.
I suppose with such really good media training, this is one of the reasons why conspiracy theorists think that maybe there is a lot of spin going off in the MOD world and world of ufology, because this is quite clever stuff for most people. For me, this is normal, because I have to do it for a living.
Yeah.
So, but for the rest of people, they sit there and listen to the politician waffle and think he's actually said something. We sit there for an hour and say, well, he's just spent an hour saying nothing.
Well, one of the classic things is when I hear someone on Newsnight, when somebody puts a really difficult point, when someone says, well, we are where we are,
Absolutely.
But-
That's not the question.